Welcome to The Heart of the Matter, an Our Place podcast, where we look at the issues surrounding homelessness, addiction, and mental health on the streets of Greater Victoria.
Bruce, I want to welcome everyone to The Heart of the Matter, our continuing Our Place podcast. I'm Steven Seltzer, Manager of Special Events and Corporate Philanthropy for Our Place. I'm very fortunate today to have Bruce Williams, Chamber Executive CEO. Thank you so much for coming.
The Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce that operates in the ancestral unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, which is the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And Stephen, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm so glad you did the territorial greeting. We're thrilled to have you, Bruce, as we record this just before Christmas. As the Chamber CEO, and you're talking to your members every day, is there a common mood amongst your members heading into the Christmas break this year?
Well, everybody's ready for a break. It's been another challenging year for everyone. We've seen some recovery, of course, in the economy, which is great. It came back a little stronger than everyone thought. In fact, that's led to the fact that the Bank of Canada has had to slow down the economy by raising interest rates. But there's some ongoing challenges and some ongoing opportunities all the time. But I think in general, everybody's pretty optimistic about us moving forward. One of the things that we'll probably touch on later on is that people have found terrific abilities to collaborate in the last year or two or three as we get through this together. But in general, I think everybody's pretty optimistic. There are some concerns, but we're just happy to be moving forward and out of all of this turmoil we've seen for the last 3 years.
That's great to hear. Let's talk about your background before we get into it. You come strongly from the media side of things into your role as CEO. What are a couple of skills you've picked up with this new position? What are some that you brought from the other side of the world, media?
From the dark side to this side, you mean?
The dark side.
Well, the ability, I guess, to communicate. Since I was a kid, I've actually been pretty capable at public speaking. It never intimidated me. It never frightened me. I was always kind of into that. So in a way, maybe that's what led me into media in the beginning. But I think it's really important that communication skills be at the top of the list when you come to the skills of a chamber executive, because we articulate that position between government and business and try and articulate on both sides as to what's important to everyone. So, and one of the other things about being in media, so I was a radio guy, and then I became a TV guy, and I was a producer, and I was a program host and a talk show host and a features producer. The ability to be a quick study, right? Because in media, you're bouncing from story to story to story to story, many of them in one day very often. And it could be something that you knew nothing about and something that you had nothing to do with ever in the past. And then the next day you completely change direction and talk about something else. So you have to kind of ramp up in a pretty big hurry to better understand what it is you're talking about so that you have some perspective on that. But at the same time, you don't want to do too much background research so that you know everything, because if you know everything, you won't have any questions. But you learn the ability to sort of cut through to find what the essence of an issue is. When you're creating a story, for example, through media, you want to create an outcome through the story that you're telling, but you know what the outcome is before you begin a lot of the time. So in my case, when I'm given the opportunity to speak on a platform like this, or in media, or to our members, or in person, or even in a meeting, one-on-one with someone, the ability to process and speak directly to issues that matter, to get to the point. In media, you're always on a deadline. So you learn the value of time, and wasting people's time is not something you ever want to do at the best of times, but all of us work pretty hard and our time is of great value. So a sense of respect of time is also something. The other thing too, I guess, is the relationship to community, because a lot of what I did for a long time was related to community support. And the connection between business and community is direct and it's immediate, because whatever's going on in our community is directly impacting the businesses that operate within that community. So best outcomes very often for community organizations is based on the support of business, just as it is with our place, as it is with the chamber. We in a sense rely on, we count on, and we anticipate the support of the public and the community to make us best represent ourselves and that community too. So, kind of understanding how all the pieces fit together. Everything is connected. There is a common thread through pretty much everything we do. You can connect the dots in a pretty big hurry. And in media, that's how you tell stories. So I'm in the business of telling stories to our chamber members and telling stories of how the chamber relates to the businesses in our community, but doing it in an informed and a concise manner to tell those stories is something that I picked up early on in my career, and I hope I'm still able to do.
And like you said, that ability to shift, you could have one meeting with a member talking about zoning issues, and the next is more related to maybe something that are societal issues and so on.
Sure.
So
are we talking about zoning today? Are we going to have a zoning conversation?
I can change a question here or there, but I think we'll keep a lot of what we talk about will be social and societal issues, which is actually my next question. Is a lot of people may say that the role of the chamber is, should just be to support the bottom line of a chamber member. However, I know the Victoria Chamber, for example, is dealing with a lot of social, societal issues. Is that typical of most chambers, or is that special to Victoria?
I think that's pretty typical of all chambers. I had the opportunity to gather with chamber execs like myself from across Canada in October in Ottawa at the Canadian Chamber AGM, and there was a very, very common conversation going on about public safety and about the ability of business to function safely and to deal with the mounting issues of the cost of living and the outcomes related to that. Mental health and addictions is a big part of what business is concerned with, because it impacts families, it impacts their employees, it impacts their customers and their clients, and it impacts their ability to do business in a safe and productive manner. So I think it is pretty common among chambers. But yeah, the bottom line is that we are only as strong as our weakest link. And businesses are the ones who are very often paying the cost of the impacts of societal issues. We pay the taxes that pay police. We direct our hard-earned dollars into the investment into organizations like Our Place to make sure that people do remain safe. So there is a connection between the two, and I think it's always incumbent upon business to realize their responsibility to support community in that way. And chambers share that across the country. It's kind of in our foundation and in our DNA. And we quite honestly don't understand businesses who don't step up to support community in some way, whatever it might be, whether it's direct support for an agency like yours, whether it's for minor sports, whether it's an environmental cause, whatever it might be. We have to be as strong as we possibly can so that we remain a safe and thriving community. And we strongly encourage people to always have a good social conscience within their DNA and make sure that they do everything they can to support community organizations.
Right. There is a lot of anger out there, as there are in most all cities. Victoria is not atypical. What do you tell your owners, managers who bring up issues of people suffering or living rough outside their businesses? We get calls. We get some people who basically will blame Our Place and other charity groups for the ills out there in our community, and we're desperate to let people know we're striving so hard to be part of any solutions. What kind of conversations do you have with members around issues of poverty, homelessness, and so on?
Well, there's a lot of frustration over it. I think a lot of people are frustrated that individuals find themselves in that circumstance in the first place. I think you and I have had the conversation before where I challenge people and say, well, what if Our Place wasn't there? What if they weren't doing what they do to care for those people? Who would do that? Would the situation be worse for those people? Absolutely, it would be worse for those people. I think the frustration comes from a lack of understanding of how those people ended up in that circumstance. They were someone's child at some point. They were born. They were a baby with their entire life ahead of them. And obviously something went sideways, whatever it might have been that happened in their lives to intervene in that. Part of the frustration I get is that they feel, people who feel that they're all criminals, that what they do is criminal activity. No, it's not. In fact, all of the attention that goes to the crime and the violence associated with that community is perpetrated by a very, very, very small number of people among that community. Most of them are law-abiding, peaceful citizens that just find themselves compromised, whether it's by mental health, whether it's by addiction, which are kind of the same thing, really. I think we all know people who basically live paycheck to paycheck. And if that paycheck goes away, which happened in the pandemic, which happens as things shift in our economy, those people lose that stability of that idea of living one paycheck away from living on the street. And I think people have to understand that, be a bit more tolerant of that, and understand that that's what's at the root of all of this stuff. A lot of these people have had a life. A lot of those people actually have a job. They do work. They just happen to have a job that doesn't pay very well because they either don't have the capacity to work more or they don't have the skills to achieve more earnings. So I think people need to take a really good hard look at that. And I have to say that at the root of a lot of the problems that we see, the media will very often go out of their way to report the crime and violence associated with that community instead of concentrating on the root cause of it all, which is mental health and housing. You know, if you're going to manage someone's mental health better, you need to house them. If they are uncertain as to where they're going to live, or if they're living in a very unfortunate or inconvenient circumstance, balancing their mental health is very, very difficult. So for those who say, well, if they prove they can behave themselves, then we should give them a house. No, you're wrong. We have to give them a home to begin with to help them get themselves on some sort of path of peaceful reconciliation with who they are as a person. We all know, I've had mental health issues in my own life, and I've spoken about that openly, that I had been to counseling. I suffered from a terrific sense of depression at one time. I had very low self-esteem at one time, and it affected my behavior and my ability to function. And I sought help, and I found that help, and it straightened me out. And it helped me better understand what was going on in my life.
And I'm sure it wasn't a quick fix.
It was not a quick fix at all, but there was a fix, and I'm very thankful for that to this day. And I share this story for that purpose, to say that if you feel that you're having some sort of a struggle in your life, it doesn't show weakness to admit that. It doesn't show weakness to seek help. It actually shows remarkable strength, because it took me a lot of strength to stand up and do that for myself. So to go back to the people who are finding themselves in a homeless or an unsettled living circumstance, we need to understand that they need support to get back to somewhere that's a bit closer to what is better for them, because that way they might again become a more functional part of our society. In other words, maybe they will at some point be able to work and satisfy their own needs and be proud of who they are. So we can't condemn people for behavior that's related to a collapse of mental health. We need to be more understanding and knowledgeable about that. That's the conversation I have with people when they complain about it.
Awesome. Thank you. And part of what the Chamber does, a huge part, is advocacy. Are there some social programs, services that the Victoria Chamber advocates for? We have a new mayor and council. We have new provincial ministers in place. Are there issues related to both of our institutions that the Chamber advocates for?
Yeah, all of them. Any issue that comes up from any organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a government ministry, we learn all we can about that, and we do advocate for it. On the business side, we advocate for a more stable supply chain for the goods and services and things that we need to function every day. We advocate for anything that will make this a better place to live for everyone. We want a safer and more prosperous community for all, whoever they might be. So there are not any social service agencies that we would not support, with the exception of some that maybe have some sort of a political agenda that we don't think aligns with everyone's well-being. But we do all we can to support in every possible way. And when we do speak with government, they reach out to us and we reach out to them. And we have a very healthy respect for each other. There are things that we may disagree on. We will always openly advocate for what we think would be the best action by government. If they choose to take another direction, we do not criticize them for that, because we always give them credit for making an informed decision. And we will always support anything that makes this a better place to live. And we appreciate the outreach that they do with us, and vice versa. We're a pretty big organization. Depends who you talk to. We're the second or third largest chamber in British Columbia. We're one of the largest in Canada. So our advocacy is listened to and is acted upon. And we have seen a lot of our advocacy enacted by legislation and action by government. So we have a good relationship with all levels. New councils, yes, there are some. We are the regional chamber. We're the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. So we represent the entire sort of footprint of the CRD, with the exception of the Gulf Islands. So yeah, we pay attention to all issues in all areas. And we again understand that all the dots do connect, and we have a common shared interest in all of that stuff.
Sure, and of course, all these issues are regional. We have locations throughout the 13 municipalities, but so many people do think of Victoria in terms of, sort of a sense of centralized services. So your direction from members or your focus so many times, in spite of the fact that there's maybe a homeless encampment in Metchosin, or we have a treatment center for people with addictions in View Royal, you're almost forced to keep coming back to Victoria.
Well, it's kind of ground zero, right? Because that's where your main facility is. That's where, according to the media, the hub of activity happens in Victoria, and that is what media speaks about. They do some things that relate to the outlying areas, but Victoria is ground zero. That's the convenient place to cover. So that's what gets the attention, right? And people listen to that. And yeah, there are a lot of services concentrated in the core area of downtown Victoria, but there are organizations like yours that do outreach in other parts of the region too. And each region has their own individual and unique issues. It may just not be as visible and as concentrated as it is in Victoria.
What kind of things bring you? We're heading, as we record this, we're heading into a holiday Christmas break. What kind of things bring you and your board hope in the year ahead? We're still seeing so many businesses working their way out of the effects of the pandemic. We're still of course, seeing the people that we serve, so many of them on the streets, in spite of the fact over the last couple of years, we have been able to house a lot more, even if they're in temporary shelters. We're about to open our first long-term residences on Albina, but not just housing, but in terms of our community. What kind of things bring you and your board hope this coming year?
Well, hope that more projects move forward to create housing. It's talked about for a long time. We would like to see something streamline the whole permit process, where people that want to build housing have to jump through a lot of hoops. And we understand the diligence that municipal governments feel they're obliged to put in place. But we need to really get moving on that. There's some proposals that have been delayed, postponed, if you will. Deferrals given over to a next council. We don't want to make that decision. We'll let the next council decide. Well, let's get on with it, okay? You talk about your property in Saanich, the one on Albina. There's a similar one on Catherine Street in Vic West, right? Those are these modular builds that happen in a pretty big hurry. There's been an announcement of one that's going to happen right across the street from our place, actually, on Pandora. That's going to be 230-something housing units, I believe. Suites, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. All regions need to get on that, right? There's an announcement. I was at something yesterday. Today is February 16th, but I was at an announcement yesterday in Central Saanich. A company called Starlight is building about a 250 unit complex of rental housing in Central Saanich, adjacent to the highway. It's where the old Marigold Nursery used to be. Right. So that's the kind of house, like you think of all the jobs that live in the Keating Crossroad area or around the airport, in those areas. Like, people that work in those areas have to drive there. They have to commute from other places because there is not enough housing in that area. Well, these kinds of moves are starting to happen. So we need more of that. We need to find places for people to live that are closer to where they work. We need to find ways of collaborating a bit more on things. And I think businesses have understood that even competitors need to collaborate more because they're working in the same sector and they face the same challenges. There's enough to go around for everybody. So we're very confident that more of that's going to start to happen. We're confident of a return to immigration in this country. It certainly adds to our cultural mosaic, which is amazing, and we love that. But that's workforce. Those are people that are going to come and fill the jobs that everyone has created that we need people to fill right now. We've been losing workers who have had to leave here because they can't afford to live here. You're saying, you know what, I'm going back to Alberta, I'm going back to Saskatchewan, I'm going back to New Zealand, Australia, whatever it is, because we need housing. It's supply and demand, and we have to get that in place as soon as we possibly can. We need to stabilize our supply chain. We need to find more food resiliency. Or resilience. We import 90% of the food that we consume. That adds costs. That creates jobs in other jurisdictions. That makes us very vulnerable in our supply chain, as we saw in the storm last November that knocked out the Coquihalla and the rail lines. We need to be growing more of our own food and processing more of it here, full stop. And we're very confident of strides being made in that direction as well. We need to address our climate crisis, which happens every single day. And when it comes to that, there is an environmental impact, but there's also an economic impact. The number we hear quite often is that it's a $40 trillion injection into the worldwide economy, that we can start to do what we can to affect mitigation of climate change. We need to take advantage of that, and we're seeing more and more of it happen all the time. And we need to fulfill our targets for climate change action as well. So we're optimistic of all of those things happening. And I'm optimistic that the Detroit Red Wings are going to have a much better season this year, and they might even make the playoffs. So is great hope for me and so many others.
Wow, one thing at a time. We mentioned housing quite a bit, but of course there and a lot of people will remind us that there are other things that we're desperate to have, more support with complex care and so on. But it goes without saying that we look to the government for continued support to help our community.
Yeah, we're working with Island Health on some initiatives. We got a group of people together to sort of do a dialogue with the senior leadership at Island Health. It's kind of like a check-in. How you doing? How are you feeling? What are we doing right? What do you want us to do more of? We're going to be working now with Island Health to deal with some specific sectors that are having issues. The tourism and hospitality sector in particular are dealing with some issues of mental health and wellness and addictions. So we want to work with that sector, and we want to help Island Health do everything they can to help out those individuals. And then we'll move into other sectors as well. But this is that collaboration thing that's going to happen more and more. Island Health being, of course, a part of government, we want to work more closely with them to keep us all healthy and safe. Public safety is not all about policing. Policing is about enforcing laws, but it's also about keeping people safe from themselves and from others. So we need to work more toward that too.
I know from the top of our place, I know Julian, our CEO, works closely with you and looks forward to things that we can do together to support our community. There are so many initiatives that we look to business for to help us with our work, just as business looks to us to provide shelter and meals and supports for those who are struggling in our community. So we definitely look forward to many more partnerships for the year ahead.
Me too. And if anybody is watching this, if they have not yet looked into how they can help support our place, I would suggest you do that. Call Steven, go to the website, take a look at it. There is a way that you can help our place. Even if you don't have any money, there's still things you can be doing. So please don't rely on what they do without helping them do what they do. So please do what you can to support our place.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for continuing to be a champion for our place and for our community.
Well, my favorite message at this time of year is wishing everyone peace on earth. So I wish that to you and everybody.
Wonderful. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Heart of the Matter podcast. For more information about our place and the vital programs and services provided to the Greater Victoria community, please go to www.ourplacesociety.com. Our Place is a registered BC charity. You can donate by visiting the website or by calling 250-940-5060. Help us to bring hope and belonging to those in need.